Worlds Collide introduced two new tokens to the world of KeyForge upon its release, and those two tokens were to indicate Enrage and Ward. Enraging was a comically pitiful mechanic in Worlds Collide, rarely getting used, and when it was used, it wasn't to much effect. Warding, on the other hand, was one of the most important changes to the game the Crucible has ever seen, bringing some decks to a power level that could nearly be considered broken. This video analyzes the evolution of warding as a mechanic, from its introduction in Worlds Collide, through Mass Mutation, and into Dark Tidings. And let me assure you, its journey is a fascinating one. When a ward is placed on a creature, the ward protects that creature once from literally anything that would remove it from the board or deal it damage. Does a card destroy that creature? The ward protects it. Does a card purge that creature? The ward protects it. Does a card put that creature back in your hand or deck? The ward still protects it. Is that creature getting dealt a bunch of damage? The ward protects it even from that. The ward makes it so the opponent has to dedicate even more resources than normal to taking out that creature, and sometimes that can take multiple turns. Placing wards on creatures that are problematic for your opponent can really put them on the back foot, leaving them scrambling to find ways to get past the wards and destroy those creatures. In Worlds Collide, warding was found in most houses, but it showed up most frequently in houses Saurian and Star Alliance. In Saurian, there were 5 cards that utilized ward: Ancient Power, Axiom of Grisk, Imperium, Paraguardian, and Tricerian Legionary. These cards are all pretty phenomenal on their own, but when combined with other cards found throughout Worlds Collide, particularly those in Saurian, they can become frightening. One of the more notable combos is Ancient Power paired with City-State Interest. If your opponent has lots of Ember and you have lots of creatures, you can capture Ember onto all your creatures, which then all get warded with Ancient Power. But beyond being potent with City-State Interest, there are a number of other Saurian cards that exalt themselves or move Ember around that make themselves synergize with Ancient Power. Similar to warding, exalting is a very Saurian-centric mechanic, with 50 of the 65 cards that exalt belonging to House Saurian. In terms of Crucible lore, exalting represents the enormous amounts of hubris and pride the Saurian Republic possesses, living high and mighty by holding their ember out where everyone can see it and making themselves noticed. When it comes to gameplay, exalting was primarily meant to act as a risk-reward mechanic. When you exalted a creature, that creature could then perform some powerful ability. Due to the alarming ways in which the Saurians exploited Exalted Ember, exalting oftentimes became far more reward than risk, and this is seen in cards like Prefectus Ludo, Imperial Scutum, Calipigian Ideal, and Senator Shrix, just to name a few. Exalted or captured Ember on your creatures could make your creatures infinitely more powerful, could be used to forge keys, and could even be moved straight into your pool. Exalting also goes great with Axiom of Grisk to create some pretty one-sided board wipes. Overall, the exalting warding in Worlds Collide Saurian truly was off the charts, and made it one of the most feared houses in the game. Warding was found in other houses in Worlds Collide as well, though not quite as frequently. Star Alliance had 4 cards that warded, 3 of them being upgrades in the forms of Encounter Suit, Force Field, and Krakar's Blaster. Encounter Suit was a splendid upgrade that could make creatures a real hassle to get rid of, seeing as it protected against cards like Draining Touch and Unnatural Selection. The 4th card was Medic Ingram, a card infamous for its ability to just ward creatures left and right turn over turn with no drawback whatsoever. Medic Ingram wasn't seen again after Worlds Collide for that very reason. House Logos had 2 cards that warded, Hapsis and Hologramophone. House Untamed had a single card that warded, the witch creature the Feathered Shaman. House Shadows also had a single card that uses wards, but its action is incredibly unique and isn't really seen anywhere else in the game. This card is Hunter or Hunted, and it reads play, ward a creature, or move a ward from a creature to another creature. Moving wards around like this seems like a super cool idea, and I wish it was seen on more cards. Hunter or Hunted even lets you take a ward from an enemy creature and put it on your own, which is super neat. It's a shame that Hunter or Hunted was only printed in Worlds Collide, but seeing as warding is very much not a Shadows ability, it kinda makes sense that it hasn't been seen again. So as a summary for Worlds Collide in terms of warding, there was a lot of it, and due in part to exalting it was most potent in House Saurian. It was a welcome addition to the mechanics of KeyForge, forever changing the state and strategy of the board moving forward. However, as new sets were released, we began seeing warding less and less. Whereas in Worlds Collide, there were 13 total cards that dealt with ward, in Mass Mutation, KeyForge's very next set, there were 11. 3 of them were reprinted from Worlds Collide, Ancient Power, Axiom of Grisk, and Encounter Suit. New for the Saurians were Dark Centurion and Defense Initiative, 2 decent cards that added some conditions that needed to be met for the ward to happen. In the case of Dark Centurion, the creature needs to have Ember removed from it for it to be warded, and with Defense Initiative, you always get to ward one creature, but to ward its neighbors too, you need to exalt it, referencing that risk-reward aspect I mentioned before. Speaking of the risk-reward aspect, it seemed to shift a lot moving from Worlds Collide to Mass Mutation. In terms of warding creatures, there wasn't so much risk as there were conditions that needed to be fulfilled. With cards like Medic Ingram and Imperium, you could just ward whoever you wanted whenever you wanted, but with cards like Dark Centurion and Defense Initiative, you had to do something a little extra to get the full ward potential. Another example is with Sanctum's warding card, Emberheart, which reads Action, Exalt, Ward, and fully heal a friendly creature. Once again, you don't get to straight away ward a creature like you did with Hologramophone, Emberheart's closest equivalent, you have to exalt the creature first. For the next few Mass Mutation cards that ward, it's not so much of the cards meeting a condition as it is the cards only warding certain things. In House Dis, we have Pride, which wards each friendly Sin creature when it reaps. The 7 Sins are a dangerous force to be reckoned with in Mass Mutation, and having all of them warded is something you never want to see your opponent do. In House Untamed, we have a new Witch to replace the Feathered Shaman, that of Mercy Malkin Queen. Mercy has Skirmish and reads, after a friendly cat creature enters play, ward it. Fight, ready a friendly beast creature. The synergy between Mercy, Flumph, Lumilu, and Eunoia is a lot of fun, and the wards Mercy provides to those creatures makes it all the stronger. In Logos is Forge Compiler, which wards all your friendly creatures when your opponent forges a key. This one could really go either way, since the state of your board at the time of your opponent forging a key ultimately determines its potency. In Star Alliance, we got a new upgrade that was similar to Encounter Suit in the form of Z-Wave Emitter. Z-Wave Emitter wards the creature it's attached to at the start of your turn, but it only ever appears with Z-Force Agent, a rare creature that always comes with a number of other Z upgrades, so it's not seen very often. Also new to Star Alliance is an action that comes the closest to mimicking what Hunter x Hunter did, that of Hadron Collision, which reads, Play. Remove a ward from a creature and deal 3 damage to it. This damage cannot be prevented by armor. A guaranteed 3 damage wherever you want it, no matter how much protection the creature has, is not bad at all. I do appreciate how it straight up removes a ward token from a creature, making it that much more unique and potent. In the end, Mass Mutation redefined the meta of warding creatures in a few ways, either by attaching conditions to the ward, or by making cards only ward certain things. As a mechanic, warding was just as powerful as ever, but the fact that it was seen less and wasn't always as easy to pull off lessened its power just a little, made things more balanced overall. Gone were the decks that could just ward everything and make things impossible to deal with, and I believe the absence of those decks for Mass Mutation made the set more balanced and fun to play overall. But moving into Dark Tidings, we hit the set that made me question and analyze the evolution of warding to begin with. In Worlds Collide, we had 13 cards that warded. In Mass Mutation, we had 11, only 3 of which were from past sets. But in Dark Tidings, we have a mere 5 cards that do any warding, and only one of them is new, that of Old Egad, who isn't even that great of a creature. The other 4 are reprints from earlier sets, Paraguardian, Encounter Suit, and Force Field from Worlds Collide, and Z-Wave Emitter from Mass Mutation. I mentioned Old Egad already, the only new warding card in the set, who shows up in House Logos of all places. The best comparison I can make with Old Egad is the Feathered Shaman. Whereas with the Feathered Shaman you could repeat his effect numerous times, every time you fought or reaped with him, with Old Egad it's just a one and done destroyed effect to ward both his neighbors. And so I ask, what happened to warding in KeyForge? Why did it all but nearly disappear upon the release of Dark Tidings? Even the new House Unfathomable doesn't have any cards that interact with wards in any way. For the first time in the game, Saurian is outnumbered in terms of warding cards. Saurian has a single warding card, while Star Alliance has 3. What caused such a dramatic change in the amount of warding we've seen throughout the sets? Well, to answer these questions, let's go back to Worlds Collide for a minute. This is the set that introduced the houses of Saurian and Star Alliance to the game, and they were both revolutionary to the way the game was played. However, there were a number of players that claimed that House Saurian was too overpowered, especially compared to other houses in the set such as Brobnar or Untamed, and these complaints were not without their merit. One of the cards that instigated the suspicions that perhaps Saurian was too strong was Tribute, allowing you to capture 4 whole Ember from your opponent onto your most powerful creature. But it wasn't just Tribute, it was the cards that comboed with it. One of the most infamous combos in the game to date is Tribute into 6 Semper Tyrannosaurus, allowing you to capture 4 Ember onto your most powerful creature, plus the Exalted Ember with Tribute, then move all the Ember from that creature to your pool with 6 Semper Tyrannosaurus. Sure, you lose your most powerful creature in the process, but that's hardly a drawback worth considering when you effectively get to steal 4 Ember from the opponent and gain Ember for doing it. And it went even beyond Tribute 6 Emper. Saurian could capture your Ember and then forge keys with Ember on those creatures, a concept unheard of, undreamt of before Worlds Collide, and there were a number of cards that allowed this to happen. Senator Shrix, Senator Brachus, Calipigian Ideal, etc. Usually Emberon creatures goes to the player it was captured from when those creatures are destroyed, but Saurian had cards that prevented even that, such as Prefectus Ludo and Imperial Scutum. Even in the realm of key cheats, Saurian came out swinging, with a whopping 3 to their name: Imperial Forge, Triumph, and the Colosseum. They introduced some of the biggest creatures in the game at that point, unrivaled even by House Brobnar, such as Grimlocust Ducks, Brutoton Auxiliary, and Gargantodon. Their artifacts were off the charts too, such as the Golden Spiral potentially rule of sixing with Cincinnatus Rex, or Imperial Road allowing you to play Saurian creatures out of house turn after turn. And of course, the sheer amount of warding found in Saurian synergized with all of it, perfectly enhancing their style of gameplay, allowing them to add an extra layer of protection to everything they did. Ultimately, Saurian possessed an elite suite of cards unlike anything before it, nearly every one an absolute banger providing abundant utility. But as I detailed before, Saurian was not the only house with incessant warding. Star Alliance was the second. Even with all the warding and exalting and Ember exploitation Saurian did in Worlds Collide, Star Alliance still had one card that I think was the tipping point for the KeyForge design team to pull back on warding, and that was Medic Ingram. Her ability to ward any creature she wanted, including herself when she was played, and then every time she fought or reaps, made her almost the equivalent of a witch creature, like Dusk Witch or Hunting Witch, a creature you simply had to get rid of before her entire battle line was protected with wards. To make matters worse, she was printed at common, and that meant she appeared in multiples much of the time. Worlds Collide contained such an excess of warding, and it was generally the rule rather than the exception that warding, combined with the insane abilities of other cards, elevated the power of a deck exponentially, sometimes to the point of being absolutely broken. The designers of KeyForge undoubtedly saw this, not only in Saurian but also in Star Alliance, and I think Medic Ingram may have put them over the edge. Moving into Mass Mutation, it was clear that they needed to pull back on warding. All the cards with excessive warding were not reprinted, meaning things like Medic Ingram, Imperium, and Hologramophone were gone. In my opinion, Mass Mutation's take on warding is its most balanced yet. It's definitely still there, with cards like Ancient Power and Defense Initiative putting in real work pretty consistently. Forge Compiler and Logos can be extremely potent at times, warding a massive battle line of creatures when your opponent forges a key. And like I detailed previously, many cards only ward certain things instead of anything, such as Pride only warding Sin creatures and Mercy Malkin Queen only warding cats. Ultimately, warding became a much more balanced mechanic upon its revision for Mass Mutation. It could still be a hassle to deal with sometimes, but it wasn't nearly as overbearing as it could be in Worlds Collide. But this leads us into Dark Tidings, where warding is all but gone, save for a few rare and uncommon cards that you probably won't see very often, besides Old Egad. Perhaps the designers chose to pull back on warding so heavily for Dark Tidings because they wanted to focus on other things for that set, such as emphasizing interactions with the Tide and solidifying the identity of House Unfathomable. They had shown off a balanced version of warding in Mass Mutation, so there wasn't really any need to do it again, especially not when there were so many new things to explore, such as the Tide and the new house. But looking through the card pool for Dark Tidings, would warding have been too strong of a mechanic, perhaps even reaching Worlds Collide levels of power? Imagine being able to consistently ward creatures like P.I. Sweven, or Gatekeeper, or Larry of the Lake. There are so many creatures throughout Dark Tidings that are just so strong, that if they were consistently warded, I feel like the set would be verging on overpoweredness. Urian the Circumspect, the Vault Keeper, Old Bruno, Chronophage, Hookmaster, Cop. There are so many great creatures that would make games end quickly if warding was as prevalent in Dark Tidings as it was in previous sets. And that's not to say that there weren't powerful creatures in sets like Mass Mutation. Popping a Forge Compiler onto a board full of Fandangles, Cephaloists, and Subject Kirby's was a terrifying prospect to be sure, but imagine that happening to a board full of solid Dark Tidings creatures. In many cases, that could be even worse. But as always in KeyForge, it always depends on what you have in your deck and on deck matchups. Even in Worlds Collide, there were thousands of decks out there that didn't ward anything at all, and if it did, it didn't offer much. So obviously, remember that everything I've said in this video can fluctuate madly based on any number of factors, and things vary from match to match and deck to deck. But nonetheless, warding is a fun and interesting mechanic in KeyForge, adding extra layers of strategy and nuance to the board and to the game in general, and I'm excited to see the steps it takes forward in future sets, or if we'll even see it at all. I thought it would be interesting to take a look at the evolution of warding thus far, so please let me know down in the comments below your thoughts on warding, how it's evolved, and how you'd like to see it evolve in future sets. Thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you all again in the next one. See you later.